Hey guys, this is Jan for Chess24. I'm excited because it's super tournament time again. The Sinquefield Cup in St. Louis is in full swing. 4 rounds have been played, and the field pretty much reads like a who is who of the chess world. Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana, Hikaru Nakamura, Wesley Topalov, Vishy Anand. Everyone's participating in this second leg of the Grand Chess Tour. To my mind, the most spectacular game of the event has been played in the 4th round, and none of the players I just mentioned were participants in that one. Instead, it's a game which I'm gonna show you in this video between Wesley and Levon Aronian. Let's see if we got a picture of the players. Here we go, the picture by Leonard Otis, by the way, from the official side. On the left side, we see Super Grandmaster Wesley originally hails from the Philippines but represents the United States of America, just like Hikaru Nakamura and Fabiano Caruana. Quite a team they have over there. Wesley already a top 10 player. I believe he's rated 2779 before this tournament. Still a bit of a newcomer at this level. He hasn't played that many super tournaments, but he has shown that he's capable of beating anybody. In Shamkir, another super tournament a couple months ago, he started with, 3.5 out of 4. He is a force to be reckoned with. He doesn't strike me as that stable on that level yet. Peter Svidler said, you never know if good Wesley or bad Wesley is gonna show up. Going into this game, he had won a nice game, lost a not so nice game, and is at 50% at 1.5 out of 3. His opponent on the right side is Grandmaster Levon Aronian from Armenia. Most of you guys will know Levon. He's gone through a rough stretch the last 1.5 years. He used to be the clear number 2 in the world behind Magnus Carlsen at something like 2,835 rating. But he's lost around 65 points over the last 1.5 years. He's dropped out of the top 10 temporarily. A lot of talk has been done about what's wrong with Levon Aronian. Is he aging? What has happened to him? No one really knows, even though I've talked about it ad nauseum. In this tournament, he seems to be doing fine so far, is at 2 out of 3 and has shown splashes of his old self. Let's see how it went in the 4th round with the black pieces against Wesley. So goes for 1 d4. Like most super grandmasters, can play anything. d4, e4, knight f3. Makes it very hard to prepare for him. He goes for d4, knight f6, c4 today. And we get a Nimzo Indian. e6, knight c3, bishop b4. One of these openings that will never die out because it's just sound and solid. Black develops his bishop, pins this knight, thereby stops e4, prepares to castle, and doesn't commit his pawns yet. He can follow up with d5, can follow with c5, can leave the pawns where they are for now and develop the pieces with b6, bishop b7. It's just a good opening, and Levon Aronian has been employing it for a while. So goes for the most popular and sharpest move in this position. For f3, this is all the rage at super tournaments. Very sharp move, trying to control the center immediately, preparing e4. But it does come at a price. The knight cannot access its natural square anymore, and the challenge for white is going to be to develop his kingside and get all his pieces out. If he manages to do that, he's often in good shape, but it's certainly a very double-edged move, which has been employed by the likes of Nakamura, Grishuk, Aronian himself recently, so it is certainly here to stay. Black has 3 choices here. The main line used to be d5 after a3, take on c3, pawn takes, and c5. C takes d5, knight takes d5. But recently we haven't seen it that much because it's been analyzed so much, and after d takes c5 it turns out that Black is, well, he's not in trouble and he can certainly hold, but it looks like he's only playing for a draw here. This position has been checked out a lot by all the super grandmasters, and they don't seem to like it that much for Black. So they've started to employ alternatives. Aronian in a recent game against Shakhmamedyarov, I think last year, he went for the move castle. It's also a very interesting move, tending to meet e4 with d5 and starting the fight in the center very quickly as well. But this time around he goes for the 3rd option and the move we've seen a lot recently, the move c5. Very logical as well, attacking the white center, forcing white to go for d5, grabbing more space, opting for some sort of Benoni structure, which is double-edged by nature. If white manages to finish his development here, get his pieces out, let's say go e4, knight e2, knight g3, bishop e2, and short castles, he tends to be in very good shape because he controls extra space and he can then follow up trying to attack the black king, which will normally seek refuge on g8. So black's job is to bother white while white is trying to get all his pieces out, and many different ways have been tried to do that. Castles, e4. The main move here used to be the move b5, even a move earlier, just trying to open up the position immediately. b5 can lead to incredibly sharp play. It has been seen, for example, in a game by Aronian on the white side against Sergei Karyakin, where the board was set on fire pretty much instantly. After e5, e takes d5, e takes f6, d4. We get some crazy complications, and who knows who's better and why. But Aronian with black probably came to the conclusion he doesn't want to play this position, and he wants to take it a bit slower. Goes for the move d6. We're still very much in mainline theory land. This move has been employed by Wesley, Topalov, Magnus Carlsen. Bunch of players. D6, of course, very normal move. Preparing knight d7, knight e5 amongst other things, and stopping white from going e5. Wesley so goes knight ge2 here, which I believe is the best move. It's part of the plan outlined earlier. Go knight e2, knight g3, bishop e2, and short castle. Gotta get this knight out. Other moves have been played. For example, Hikaru Nakamura played bishop to d2 here, breaking this pin immediately in a famous game which he went on to lose against Magnus Carlsen after building up a completely winning position. I do believe So's move is better, and clearly both players were still in book here. Bishop d2 sometimes has some drawbacks. We're going to see that later in the game. Sometimes it could even be a problem that the d2 square is no longer available for the king. Let's say ed, cd, knight h5 is a critical follow-up, and in quite some lines after g4, queen h4 check happens, and you wouldn't mind being able to put your king on d2. So knight e2, I believe, is a good move, and here is where Aronian comes up with what he prepared for the game, or shows what he prepared for the game. Slower move than we're used to. He goes for a6. Earlier, we've seen the move b5 employed by Wesley and Topalov, for example, trying to undermine the center immediately, which once again leads to huge complications. Alexander Grishuk played knight f4 here. Knight g3 might be a move. D takes e followed by c takes b might be an idea. It can become very, very messy. Aronian plays a6, preparing this b5 move, or preparing e takes d followed by b5, trying to grab some space on the queen side. Wesley so decides to prevent that by radical means. He goes for a4. I'm not sure about this move, to be honest with you. It does have its pros, of course, in stopping b5, but it also has its cons. First of all, white normally wants to play on the king side, and moving pawns on the side where you don't want to play, on the queen side, can weaken your position there should it open up later. We'll see that can be a factor in the game, and also a4 does lose a little bit of time. It makes it harder to undermine this bishop from b4. It can no longer be touched with a3. So a4 is a double-edged decision. I don't like it much. I think he should have gone for knight to g3, when logical play would be something like b5 now, and white just ignores it, continues development with bishop to f4 or bishop to e3. I do believe that we're gonna see this position at the highest level shortly, and that the theoretical debates will continue here. However, So played a4, and Aronian came up with a very sneaky move. He later mentioned that it wasn't his own idea, but that it was an idea of his friend and training partner and my former boss, Peter Lako. It's not a move that springs to mind immediately, but it is very clever. It's the move bishop to a5. Now you might ask yourself, what sense does this make? I think I can explain it. Bishop a5 prepares the move b5. The point is you can't go b5 immediately because of a takes b5, and you can't recapture, since rook takes a8 would win a rook then. But after bishop a5, b5 is a threat. Let's make a natural move. What is a natural move? Knight to g3. Now black can go b5, and the point is after a takes b5, not only is his rook not hanging, but black is also threatening to win the white rook with bishop takes c3 check. So white has no time for cb, bishop c3, followed by rook takes a1. So this bishop a5 blocking the a file in order to prepare b5 is a very sneaky idea and was cooked up at home by Peter Lako, probably in a training session with Levon Aronian. Bishop a5, Wesley so could not find anything better than going for bishop to d2 now, stopping this threat of b5 because he now defends the rook on a1 with his queen, which b5 might still be possible, but it's a bit harder to execute now. White after b5 would have a choice between de, bishop e6, cb5, which is interesting, or maybe even a takes b5, followed by knight takes b5. So Aronian changes plans after bishop d2, and bishop d2, as I mentioned, has its own drawbacks, takes this square on d2 away from the white king. It's not the most active square for the bishop, and it slows down development a little bit. Aronian now goes for e takes d5, c takes d5 is forced, establishing the standard modern Benoni structure, and knight to h5. This is a very direct attacking move, preparing in some lines queen h4, but mainly f5 to undermine the center and open the position up before white manages to complete his development. Knight h5 is also directed against the typical white move knight to g3, so white no longer finds it so easy to get his pieces out. He would love to kick this knight away with g4, but g4 does run into queen h4 check, which is highly unpleasant now that the bishop is on d2. There's some lines, if black goes for this knight h5 idea earlier where g4 works and queen h4 check can be met by king d2, no longer the case, so this is a very clever reaction to bishop d2. So Levon Aronian has won the opening battle, but the game is only just starting. Wesley so goes for the move g3, stopping queen h4 check, and preparing to develop his pieces in a slightly more humble fashion with bishop g2 and short castles. Aronian goes knight bd7, dreaming of knight e5 followed by knight d3 checkmate, but that won't happen of course. Still, it is very useful to bring this knight to e5 from where it has access to many juicy squares. Bishop to g2, and here knight e5 was certainly an option, but white would castle away. Instead, Aronian now seizes the moment, the last moment where the white king is in the center, to execute the advance he's been preparing for a long time, and goes for the move b5. Once again, tactics complement strategy here. White could take this pawn, but would be a bit of a suicide commando, because here after bishop takes d2 check, white would have to recapture with a king, and you get some sort of Benko gambit structure with the white king on d2, which is quite bad news, and this position is just not playable for white. Bishop a6 looks very strong, with the idea of knight takes d6, queen b6, hitting the pawn on b2 and the knight on d6 would be pretty much game over. So you should not even dream about taking that pawn. Instead, white should try to finish his development. Arguably, I believe the smallest evil in this position, say the smallest evil, I'll just say, was to castle kingside, allowing black to go b4, kicking this knight away, and now go for the reasonably humble knight b1. But at least the king is out of the center, and white could hope to untangle with, let's say, bishop e3, knight to d2. Black is fine, he has many ways to play here. Bishop b6, for example, hinting at c4, and he has a decent active position, but the battle would only just begin. However, Wesley so didn't like this, and he didn't like a takes b5, so he went for a very ambitious move, the move g3, g4, hoping to kick this knight away. If the knight had to retreat, white would be in great shape. Now he would, he probably wouldn't castle, he would start with knight to g3, freeing that e2 square for the other knight. I think that was the idea after b4, knight c2, and he would have a very promising attacking position on the king side. However, Aronian obviously didn't play knight h5 to just retreat after g4, and he does throw in a little intermediate move, plays b4. Could also have gone queen h4 check, king f1, and then b4, but he prefers to start with a move b4, anticipating that queen h4 won't run away. Wesley so once again chooses the most ambitious move, but he's overdoing it here with the retreat knight to b1. He had to sort of bail out by playing g takes h5, b takes c3, b takes c3, When he would even be a pawn up, however, the black pieces are very active. His king is still a little unsafe. Black would go queen h4 check, knight g3 and knight to e5. When I take black, black's position is easier to handle. He can go rook to b8, intending to invade with rook to b2. But at least it's still a game. White would manage to castle rook b8. And the position is still unclear, playable for white. His extra pawn doesn't count for much, but in some lines he can throw in h6 to disrupt black a little bit. So the fight would still be in full swing, but Wesley so did not fancy that option, went for knight to b1. Once again, hoping for this knight to retreat when he's still in good shape after castles, or after the move played in the game, queen h4 check, king f1. He was probably anticipating that now this knight has to retreat. If the knight goes back now, the queen on h4 all of a sudden is a bit isolated from the rest of the crew. White would have the clever little move queen to c1, threatening bishop to g5 to pick up the queen, or even bishop to e1, and white would be in very good shape. However, Levon Aronian understood all these things, of course, and he decided white pieces aren't developed, the white king is stuck in the center, I have to do something active, and he came up with a very, very powerful piece sacrifice, ignored his hanging knight on h5, just went knight to e5, put this knight on a good square and increases the pressure. The point is, if white were to take the piece immediately, there's no crazy sacrifices or anything. Black just continues building his initiative, goes for the move f5, adding this rook to the equation. And I've checked this position a bit, it's almost unplayable for white. There's just so many threats. F takes e4 is in the air, if white goes f4, there's always fe4 anyway. All the black pieces are ready for action. Bishop h3 could come, bishop g4. This knight can jump to many, many squares. And over the board, I believe it's almost impossible to defend this position. Wesley so therefore decided to deviate, not take on h5 immediately, but first went bishop e1, trying to kick the black queen away from her active square on h4. However, that did not help his cause all that much either. Aronian could have gone queen e7 here, gh and f5, still with great compensation, but at least the queen now would no longer be on this menacing square. But he found an even stronger way to play. He played queen to f6, targeting the f3 pawn. Now white no longer has a choice, he has to take the knight. If he tries to defend f3, let's say knight g1, but it's not a pretty move obviously, and also loses immediately, because now knight takes g4, exploits this pin, and the game is over. So g takes h5 is forced, knight takes f3. Black for now only has one pawn for the piece, but he does have tremendously active pieces, and especially can enjoy the fact that white has not managed to castle, his king is out in the open, and it will take white a while to catch up developing. Bishop f2 is forced to avoid any discovered checks, offering up some material to bail out, but Aronian wisely declines to take it. The computer wants to move bishop to queen takes b2 here. Let's switch the computer on. Oh no, it's not there. Let's do it without the computer. Queen takes b2 is what it suggests, but then bishop takes f3, queen takes a1, and king to g2. And black has won some material back, but white still is doing fine materially. He does have two pieces against a rook, and I can't count. 2 pawns? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, against a rook and 2 pawns, which is more or less materially balanced. And now white has some hopes to getting his pieces into the game. Black would still be fine, but Aronian rightly decides it's too early to cash in, and it's time to play for more. Plays a very strong move, bishop to g4, developing this last inactive piece, connecting the rooks and creating some very strong threats, the biggest one being knight to d4. If white were to go knight d2, let's say, knight d4 leads to a very pretty position where both these guys are pinned, so you can't deal with the knight on d4, you can't take it, and bishop takes e2 can't really be stopped. Obviously, So did not like that, and he decided to play a multi-purpose move, unpinning, going queen c1 and defending the pawn on b2. Has its drawbacks too though. He's losing more time, and as we will see after black's next move, the queen on c1 can also be misplaced in many lines. The next move, one of the star moves of the game, even though it's hard to single out one move. Aronian just plays great moves all along, but the next move I found particularly hard to find or to even think of, because you have your pieces out on the king side, you feel like you want to do something direct. Knight e5 comes to mind, threatening knight to d3, and it would have been a good move, but Aronian found a stronger move. It's the move knight to d4, which looks strange. You are exchanging your very active knight from f3 for the white passive knight on e2, but after knight takes d4, c takes d4, Aronian had rightly judged that now he has new trumps. Biggest one is the c file is now open, rook c8 will come with tempo, and this rook will not only win a tempo, but will also eye the c2 square. Should land there, there's real trouble. Some other factors as well, this d pawn all of a sudden is a passed pawn, d3 can be played, threatening bishop e2 check in many lines, and too many arrows. And finally, this diagonal can be opened, the bishop from b6 can become quite a force. So knight d4, a very powerful decision, which, I don't find it easy to evaluate this position correctly, but Levon Aronian did. He understood his initiative is almost impossible to stop here. e5 was played, which looks desperate, but let's look at the alternatives to explain it. The move you want to play is knight to d2, then black would go rook ac8, attacking the queen, and if you put this knight on its rightful square on c4 here, problem is it's still pinned, and black can exploit that by playing some strong moves here. d3, very, very unpleasant. Preparing bishop to b6, that's already a threat, and also bishop e2 check in many lines. White should unpin his bishop with king to g1, but then the next hammer blow, the move b3. This undermines and isolates the white knight on c4 completely by stopping any potential lifelines after white going b3, and in this position just turns out that there is no defenses, too many threats, d2. There's nothing white can do, his pieces don't make any sense, and probably this knight and even more material will be lost. And that explains why Wesley So did not go for the natural move knight d2, but instead went for the move e5. The idea is after d takes e5, which was played, now he goes knight d2, and he wants to put this knight on the e4 square, which would win some time, coordinate his forces, defend f2. So it's a very good cause and certainly worth sacrificing a pawn for, but Levon Aronian remains relentless. Starts with rook ac8, no surprise there. Knight c4, still not a good move for the same reasons we just saw at d3 and black wins. So the queen has to move. Went to b1, and now So is dreaming of finally getting in knight e4 and then starting to unravel. No such luck. Aronian follows up with a fantastic move b4 to b3. He's willing to sacrifice this pawn to distract the white knight from going to e4. The problem for So is he has no choice. If he went to knight e4 anyway, ignore the pawn, queen f4, we see that this pawn is tremendously powerful because it secures the c2 square for the rook, and you can't allow this black rook to join the attack. Rook c2 would just be terminal. So there is no choice but taking this pawn. Knight takes b3, bishop to b6. And we see another effect of Aronian's play. Now his bishop is nicely positioned to cash in on this pin on f2. d3 is a huge threat. Wesley So goes for a5, tries to kick this bishop away, gain some space. The next move looks like a no-brainer. Probably everybody would play it in a blitz game or a bullet game even, but it's still a very good move. It's the move bishop to a7. The reason it's such a good move is that there was a strong temptation here. Aronian saw this temptation and correctly, in my opinion, decided not to go for it. Could have played the very spectacular move rook to c2, threatening queen takes f2 checkmate. White has to take, and now d3, now that the queen is on c2, d3 comes with tempo, attacking the queen. The queen would like to stay connected to the f2 bishop, but it's not possible because queen d2 runs into bishop e2 check, followed by queen takes f2 checkmate if the white king were to move. So this looks like it's winning on the spot, but actually white can give up the queen here. Go a takes b6, and after d takes c2, let's say h3. Turns out the situation is still not too clear. White does have quite a lot of material for the queen. A rook and 2 pieces, if I count it correctly. He does have this passed b pawn. The computer still gives black a big edge here, but I'm not that sure this is accurate, and I much prefer the solution Levon Aronian went for, which is to keep the tension and go for the sort of slow but unstoppable attack with bishop to a7, which keeps all his trumps. d3 is still a threat. The e-pawn will march in many lines, and we see one more idea in the game after king to g1, finally unpinning and thereby stopping the move d3. Aronian had one more ace up his sleeve. Another very strong move, which he played instantly. The moves just flowed for him in this game. Not sure that makes sense, but you get the idea. Bishop to f5. Main idea of bishop f5 is to get these central pawns rolling. If the white queen were to move somewhere, let's say e1, it can't go to d1 because of bishop to c2 picking up the knight. So let's say queen e1. Now black will play e4, playing to go e3. And if bishop takes e4, rook fe8, introducing a new pin to the position and winning on the spot. Can't do that. Wesley so tried the positionally correct move, bishop to e4, trying to block these pawns on e5 and d4. But there are still too many tactics in the position, and Levon Aronian found a very strong and clean way to already finish the game here. He went queen g5 check, king to f1 is forced back to this dreaded f1 square, and a very nice piece sacrifice, queen to f4. Attacking this bishop after the obvious move bishop takes f5. The problem is black now goes d3, reintroducing the idea of queen takes f2 checkmate. White tries to stop that by going queen e1. Then this rook finally gets his word in, goes rook to c2. And the game is over. Rook takes f2 check, followed by mate, cannot be stopped. One last trick that white could have tried after d3 is to go bishop takes h7 check, hoping for king takes h7, when all of a sudden after queen takes d3 check, white is back in business, because next move would be queen g3, defending everything. But of course that would not happen, because after bishop h7 check, black is not obliged to take on h7. He would just ignore the bishop, go king h8, and white has all the same problems he just had a move ago. Queen e1, rook c2 would still end the game. And therefore Wesley So had already seen enough. After the move queen to f4, he decided to resign here. Let's see, I think there's a video on that from the official side. Here we see him stopping the clocks and the players exchange score sheets. Not a good day at the office for Wesley So, but a fantastic win for Levon Aronian. Like, you might not hear my enthusiasm, but really if you go through all the decisions he's made, starting with the position after king f1, knight e5, and all the moves that followed were at a fantastically high level. Sometimes it even took the computer a while to understand why did he do that and not the other move, which I like better, and then the computer would change his mind, and we can only applaud Levon Aronian for a fantastic attacking game. Personally, I'm very happy to see Levon Aronian back in great shape. He's at 3 out of 4 now in the Sinquefield Cup as the joint leader, and to my mind the chess world is a better place with Levon Aronian in good form. He's such a creative guy, and we've seen it in this game. Let's see how the tournament goes for him. For now, Aronian and Topalov are in the shared lead with 3 out of 4, but the world champion Magnus Carlsen only half a point behind. And there are no easy opponents in this field, so we're still in for a lot of action. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you liked it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out chess24.com, become a premium member, it's worth it, there's a lot of good stuff. Share the video, tell a friend, do whatever you like. We'll be back covering the Sinquefield Cup. The 5th round is starting soon. Check that out as well. Thanks a lot for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.